another nail in my coffin.
Hey everybody, it's me, your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and this is my series, Nails in a Coffin, where we learn that with great kills, there must always come great nails. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. We're getting deeper into the Saw franchise, covering Saw 4 this week. But before we start, I do want to ask if you hit that subscribe button. I'd love to hit 500 subs by the end of the year. Your help, it's totally possible, so I really do appreciate it. In my episode last week, in case you kind of missed it, I was gassed and knocked out. I'll put a card up here to that episode. And when I woke up, there was a message from Jigsaw stating that I had to cover all the Saw films before Halloween. And I think that's doable if I do one a week. So count me out. I think I should be good to go. But he said if I don't finish it by then, I'm going to be the one getting nailed. Here's a summary of the average nails in a coffin for the first 3 movies in the Saw franchise. Saw 3 coming in with a very high average, but I feel it was pretty accurate when I rated those kills. And I have a feeling that's definitely going to stick for a while. You know, I've seen all these movies, haven't rated them yet, but I definitely think that's going to stick. And we might as well find out how Saw 4 does. So sit back, relax, and let's start the nailing. Our first kill happens just about 9 minutes into the movie. Trevor, he wakes up in a mausoleum with his eyes sewn shut and a chain secured around his neck, and the other end of the chain is around the neck of Art, who has his mouth sewn shut. So communication is not going to be easy here. Between them, the chain is connected to a winch. Trevor is panicking since he can't see anything and doesn't know what's going on. He hears Art. Guess what? Art can't talk, so this upsets Trevor even more. Art sees that there's a key to his restraint on the back of Trevor's neck. Trevor is flailing around so much, he starts pulling the chain across the room, and this activates the winch, and it starts to slowly pull them two together. It's a do-or-die situation, so Art pretty much just decides to attack Trevor so he can get the key from him. They fight back and forth for a little bit. Trevor was even able to stab Art in the leg, but without eyesight, Trevor lost his fight, and Art killed him with the hammer. He retrieves the key and is able to unlock his restraint, and he rips his mouth open. Trevor gets the first set of nails for Saw 4, and I'm going to give him 2 nails in a coffin. The tough part of raiding victims with jigsaw traps is most of them have a very short amount of time to escape the trap, and the traps are never going to be easy. Trevor couldn't see, and I could understand how scary that would be, waking up somewhere with the chain around your neck and your eyes sewn shut, and you hear somebody in the room with you, but you don't know who they are or why they're there. That can be pretty terrifying. And I think he reacted how most people would react, and there was no way to know the other person in the room was a good guy or a bad guy. And I'm going to put more of the ownership on Art here, since he ripped his mouth open after escaping the trap. So it was possible he could have done that and communicated with Trevor. And the guy was blind. He did what he could do, and I feel he deserves at least 2 nails in the coffin. Our next guest occurs after Officer Rigg was drugged unconscious while he was in his home. He wakes up in a bathtub with water running on him. He gets out of the tub, and when he opens the bathroom door, it triggers this camera on his TV showing a video from Jigsaw. Jigsaw tells him that this is going to be his rebirth. In his apartment, he finds a woman, Brenda, strapped to a chair with her hair attached to some gears behind her. The trap starts to rotate the gears, pulling her scalp back. There are no knives or anything to cut with in the apartment, and the combination to the lock is on the gears. Riggs was able to unlock the trap, and he frees Brenda before all of her scalp was pulled off. But when he gets to something to help her stop the bleeding, she grabs a knife from under the TV. When he returns, she attacks him and she tries to kill him. During the struggle, he pulls her hair back, getting her off of him, and she winds up getting thrown into a mirror, and she gets cut up and dies from the blood loss. After Brenda dies, Rigg actually finds a tape recorder intended for Brenda, and it told her that if an officer saves you, he's going to arrest you for your crimes, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail. And because she was kind of a pimp and human trafficking was involved. So her choices were to pretty much just kill the man that saved her or go to prison. Okay, Miss Brenda, I'm going to give her 1.5 nails in a coffin. She could only be saved by Officer Rigg here. She was helpless, strapped to that chair. She had to endure incredible pain, having most of her hair and scalp ripped out. But she was alive, and her injuries technically were not life-threatening. She really didn't want to go to prison, obviously, so she decided to kill the man that just saved her life. I feel like that was a stupid decision. Granted, she was not a nice person at all. Her character traits were shit. But what made her think she can kill the cop after going through what she just experienced? She knows she was going to be at a disadvantage. All she had was a knife, and she knew he had a gun because he actually shot the trap to try and get it, to stop. But yeah, this one just really had stupid written all over it, and I'm only going to give her that extra half a nail because she did have almost all of her hair pulled out, so she was terrified, probably not thinking the clearest. So I believe I'm being generous, and I'm going to give Brenda 1.5 nails in a coffin. Next up, we have Ivan, who's a disgusting person. He was forced into a trap by Officer Rigg, who's just following directions himself from Jigsaw so he can save Detective Matthews' life. Ivan is forced to be chained to a bed by all his limbs, and if you've seen this movie, you know why this person actually really does deserve to die. Officer Rigg picks up the tape recorder, and we learn that Ivan has assaulted many women and actually recorded it, and he has to pretty much give up his eyes to save his life. His task is to press these switches, which will send a spike into each one of his eyes, and if he fails to do so, he's going to be drawn and quartered. Rigg leaves the room. Trevor presses the first switch, and he thinks he's in the clear, ready to press the second one. But he kind of waits too long, and he's killed in one of the more satisfying kills in the franchise. Ivan earned himself 1 nail in the coffin. He was able to take one eye out, but he wasted time. He knew time was running out. He should have pressed both buttons at the same time. Plus, I can't give a character like this more than 1 nail in a coffin. He was a disgusting person who deserved to die. Now, I normally just rate how well a victim responds to the life-threatening situation, but in some cases, I also have to consider how they got into their predicament. And a person like Ivan, his actions put him in this position, and for all those reasons, this ass is getting 1 nail in the coffin. Officer Rigg leaves the motel, and he still continues to follow clues from Jigsaw, and they lead him to an elementary school where Rigg had once attacked a man named Rex, who he thought was physically abusing his own daughter, Jane. As he arrives at the school, he finds Rex and his wife, Morgan, in one of the classrooms. They're chained back to back, being held up, impaled by several metal spikes. Rex is already dead from his wounds, but we do learn that previously, Morgan had the choice of slowly bleeding to death, or she could remove the spikes. Her wounds were non-life threatening. However, Rex's spikes are piercing all of his vital organs, and tired of abuse from her husband, Morgan starts to remove the spikes, saving her life while killing her asshole husband. And with this death, I'm giving Rex 1 nail in the coffin. I'm not going to go too much into detail for this one. Granted, he was going to die no matter what. I mean, he was an abusive asshole, and his life was in the hands of his wife. He never really tried to talk to her or apologize or anything. And I feel like she did what she did because of all the abuse she suffered from Rex. And there wasn't much he could have done, but his actions did put him in this predicament that he was found in. I have to take that into consideration since his life was in her hands, and that's why she killed him. So he more than deserves only 1 nail in the coffin. We next see the detectives going over evidence in the classroom where Rex and Morgan were. Forensics are dusting for fingerprints, and some are just taking pictures. 2 detectives are talking about how Art from the first trap is a lawyer. He represented the other victims of Jigsaw traps that we've seen. When one of the forensics officers is dusting a trap for fingerprints, he inadvertently sets it off. A spike flies across the room and goes through the head of one of the photographers, killing her instantly. I'm going to give this unnamed police photographer, a pass. Her death was somebody else's fault. She did nothing wrong or stupid. The other person was just dusting for fingerprints. I'm guessing no one thought they were going to be in a life-threatening situation. Maybe the room should have been more secured or whatnot, but she was pretty much just in the wrong place at the wrong time here, killed through the actions of somebody else. So when that happens, I'm pretty much going to give that person a pass. We have Cecil up next, and he's abducted at a fair, and he wakes up strapped to a chair. His arms and legs are secured to it, and blades are cutting into his limbs. John is standing over him, and he tells Cecil pretty much how he feels about him. According to John, Cecil has no respect for human life. John then places a contraption of kitchen knives on Cecil's face, and he has to press his face through the knives to free himself from the trap, or else he's going to bleed to death. Cecil tries a few times to press his face, but he can't push it all the way forward. He does this multiple times, and just when he's about to free himself, the chair he was sitting on collapses, and this does free him from the trap. John was standing there watching, and we see he gets up, bleeding heavily, mind you. He actually lunges at John, threatening him. John just simply sidesteps, and Cecil dives into a nest of razor wire, and he flails around till he pretty much just bleeds to death. Cecil was actually Jigsaw's first victim, chronologically, and he's getting 1 nail in the coffin. He didn't wait long to press his face into the blades, but he made some bad mistakes. He was going back and forth a few times when pressing his face into the knives. Not saying it was an easy thing to do, but I think once you start moving forward, you have to keep pressing forward no matter how much it hurts. Otherwise, you're going to do way more damage, and it's going to hurt a whole lot more. And the trap even malfunctioned when the chair broke. And it actually looked like Jigsaw was going to let Cecil go since he did, pass the test. But he then made a dumb decision to attack the man while you're bleeding that heavily instead of knowing if you're not going to get medical attention, you're not going to live long. You're going to bleed to death. So I think his worst thing he could have done was actually jumping at Jigsaw trying to fight him. But yeah, all it does is prove that Cecil did not respect human life, even his own, which is why he only gets one nail in the coffin. Agent Strom is looking for Detective Rigg. He made his way to the meatpacking plant. That was John's hideout. Art, from the beginning of the movie, he's got a trap attached to his back. He's got Detective Matthews and Detective Hoffman in a trap. Matthews is hanging tough over a block of melting ice with his neck tied to a chain. Hoffman strapped to a chair. If a door opens before Art presses the button, Eric's head will be crushed by large blocks of ice and Hoffman will be electrocuted. With seconds to go, Rigg actually arrives and Eric is yelling at him not to open the door. He shoots at the door to get Riggs to back off, but it's too late. Riggs breaks the door down. He's shot by Eric. Once the door is busted, a trap is sprung. Eric Matthews' head is crushed. Riggs sees this, believes Art did it, shoots Art twice in the chest, and then Detective Hoffman's chair is lowered into this electrified water, but he's not actually killed. The new kid on the block is getting 3 nails in a coffin. Going back to the previous movie, he did the smart thing just to break his foot instead of cutting it off. He fought Amanda with the busted foot, and he would have actually killed her if it was not for his foot. He survived being in prison in horrible conditions for 6 months. This took a toll on him physically and mentally. He did try to go out on his old terms, but Art had stopped him. He hung on to life more than most people would have been able to, I feel. For his death, his fate was out of his hands mostly. He knew Rigg was on his way, and he couldn't just shoot through the door and kill him, which is why he waited so long to shoot. But there wasn't much else he could have done, and taking everything into consideration, he fought, and he survived, so I feel he deserves 3 nails in the coffin. While that was taking place, Agent Strom hears gunshots right outside the room where Jeff just killed Amanda and Jigsaw, which resulted in the death of Lynn. He enters the room right after Lynn was killed. Jeff is standing there looking around the room. He turns to see the agents, yells out, "Where's my daughter?" He raises his gun, points it towards Strom. Having no choice but to shoot, Agent Strom puts 2 rounds into Jeff, killing him. I'm going to give Jeff 1.5 nails in a coffin. I know he was grieving and couldn't get past the loss of his son. As a parent, that's understandable. But that's the reason I'm giving him that extra half a nail. But he mainly did not make smart decisions. If he listened to what he was told, maybe he and Lynn would still be alive. And I don't blame him for killing Amanda, but I do think he was foolish to kill Jigsaw. If I were him, I would not have left my wife's side after she was shot by Amanda, and I would have done everything in my power to ensure she lived, putting everything else secondary. If he did that, there's a chance he and Lynn would still actually be alive, but he didn't. He made a lot of dumb decisions, and for that, I'm giving him 1.5 nails in the coffin. Art's not dead yet. He and Rigg are both shot, bleeding on the floor. Art was trying to tell Rigg he was being tested. All he had to do was wait for 90 minutes to be up, and Detective Matthews would be alive. Art reaches in the bag, yelling, "He was testing you." Rigg tells him, "Let me see your hands," but Art pulls something out of a bag, and thinking it's a weapon, Rigg shoots him in the head. Art earned himself 1.5 nails in a coffin. He survived the first trap in the movie. I mean, granted, he had it easier than Trevor. He was forced to follow Jigsaw's instructions or else he would die. Now, I watched this part a few times, and I looked for something that Art could have done differently. Officer Rigg shot him on sight, believing he was responsible for Detective Matthews' death. So he had no reaction time there. There was a lot going on in the moment. And he did what he could, and he already survived one of Jigsaw's traps. Now, if he had died from that gunshot, I probably would have given him 2.5 nails. However, why couldn't he just say, "I have a tape for you" from Jigsaw when he heard Riggs say, "Show me your hands"? Art knew Riggs had a gun. He was shot by it. Yet he ignored all of that and pulled something out of a bag when he was told not to. "Let me see your hands." For that alone, I'm going to give him that 1 nail in the coffin, but he did make it far in the movie, already surviving 1 trap. For that, he's going to squeak out that extra half a nail with 1.5 nails in the coffin. And this brings us to our final death in Saw 4. After Rigg was killed Art, he grabbed a tape recorder as it was playing. The voice said he was supposed to let these people save themselves. Then we get the twist in the movie. The reason Detective Hoffman is not dead, well, he's Jigsaw's apprentice. He's been helping Jigsaw and Amanda this entire time. Rigg, who's bleeding out from his gunshot wound, can do nothing but just stare at Hoffman, not knowing what the hell really is going on, not knowing why he was working with Jigsaw. Hoffman says, "Game over," and he walks out of the room, leaving Rigg to die. He then walks across the hall to where Strom just killed Jeff, and he slams that door shut. Our final nails for Saw 4 go to Rig, and I'm going to give him 2 nails in a coffin. He was shot while trying to save Detective Matthews. Now, if he had listened and followed the instructions from Jigsaw's tape, he and Detective Matthews would probably still be alive. But, as the tape said, he likes to kick doors down and try and save everybody, and I can't fault him for that. He was being selfless. He couldn't do anything to Hoffman because of his injury, and I was torn between him being stupid, not following Jigsaw's instructions, and him trying to save people. So this one was one of the more tough deaths I've had to rate, especially in this franchise. Now, since I think he was doing what he thought was right, and even though it was a really difficult task, I got to give him credit for that. And all things considered, balancing everything, I'm going to give him 2 nails in the coffin. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all my nails in the coffin for Saw 4. Here's a summary of all the nails I've awarded. And this is how the first 4 movies compare with their average nails in the coffin. Original Saw, 1.4 average. Saw 2, the lowest, with 1.25, and I think that's totally accurate. Saw 3, I think is a shockingly high one, but I have to go with it. I think it's accurate as well. And Saw 4 coming somewhere in the middle with 1.61 nails in a coffin average. I'll see you here next week when I cover Saw 5. Which came out 1 year after this one. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss us nailing this entire franchise. Really enjoying covering these movies, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and be good to each other. I am your friendly neighborhood Uncle Pete, and remember, with great kills there must also come great nails.